Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today we're going to be talking about the game Void Crew. Now, Void Crew is a up to 4-player roguelike space adventure style game. You all will pick a ship, you use that ship, you go on missions, you do missions, and you try to see as far as you can get. You either blow up in the process or you fly back to base and do it. It's very much one of those games that requires teamwork or lack thereof if you prefer to just mess around. But it's a game that uses different mechanics for different people to use to add like this asymmetric gameplay. And the way that works is there's the classes. One might be focused on flying a ship, one might be focused on using the guns, fixing the ship, and one of them is primarily for exploring outside the ship. And the game does a fairly good job of making this all work together very well. Like, this is a game that I wouldn't normally have played. Like, I know that when they brought out the 1.0 release, which wasn't that long ago at the time of the recording, that they had changed it to more of a roguelite, so you fly to place to place. And the idea is that you go on these missions, you look for upgrades, you upgrade the ship as you go, you do all this to try and level up, and then as you level up your characters, you unlock like cosmetics, stuff for your character, both their armor, all these different stuff. And you also get different ship varieties as you do that. And there's quite a few missions. There's I think there's about 6 or 7 mission types. Some of them are quite similar, but for the most part they're either you flying around blowing things up, or going out of the ship and scavenging places and turning things on. And it's got a right old mix of gameplay, but for the most part it kind of falls into 2 categories. So we're just going to go over the game, what I like about this game, and some of the things I look forward to seeing like improving, or some things that I think it might need improving on in time. So the core gameplay, which is you manning the ship and flying around, I think that core gameplay works very well. It's very much, if you've ever played things like FTL or This Means Warp, or these games that are based around you trying to work a ship, there's never enough hands for what's going on usually. So for example, there's 2 ships in Void Crew at the moment. One's a smaller one, one is a bigger one. The bigger one with 4 people is kind of manageable, but sometimes you feel like you need an extra hand, whereas the small one, 4 people is kind of enough. The ship's not huge, but you all work together to do things. So you might need somebody manning the guns, taking out fighters, taking out bombers, trying to deal with blowing up platforms and stuff that are out there. And while they're doing that, they might need the engineer to fix up their gun if something goes wrong with it. The engineer's whole job is to fix up the ship, make sure the engines are fine, stop things from happening. The pilot, his whole thing is to fly the ship, and as you get upgrades for each class, the pilot gets more maneuverability for the ship, the gunner gets more range and damage, the engineer takes less damage from things, can help charge up batteries, can do all these things, and then the scavenger has a lot of movement options. That's kind of their thing. So that core gameplay for the game works really well. I think having different options, having a lot of what would you call it, like variety in what you can do as the player. So that kind of brings me on to my next point, which is the classes. Now, without the classes, I think this game would be really boring, because the whole point of the classes and leveling up, it allows you to put points into things that will help you be a better pilot, a better gunner, right? So we start with the pilot. The pilot's whole job is to fly the ship. The upgrades that the pilot gets, he gets the ability to cast a shield that can be upgraded to help knock out things around it. You get more thruster power, you get more maneuverability in terms of how you can strafe the ship and yaw the ship and go forwards and backwards, raise and lower. That's kind of the whole pilot's thing. So when you've maxed out, which I think is like level, like from top to bottom, I think it's like level 20 or 25 or something, you as the pilot now have the best kind of, you can move that ship around, and you do. The whole thing with this game is you need to move that ship constantly a lot of the time to avoid incoming fire. As a pilot, the pilot and the engineer have probably the most intense gameplay, usually. The pilot is constantly moving the camera, constantly marking targets, constantly moving up and down, spinning the ship, because this is the problem with this game. Well, I say problem, this is a good thing. It's a good thing to have. Is you should, when you're on comms with people, you are kind of barking back and forth. The gunner's like, well, if you turn the ship too much, I can't see, depending on where the gun placement is. They're like, I need you to spin the ship around this way, and then the pilot might be like, well, I need to boost out of the harm's way. We've got bombs on our tail. The engineer's screaming at other people, and things like that. So you've got all this kind of back and forth chatter, which is why this experience is so much fun. But that's the pilot's job, is to really like level up be very maneuverable the ship, and it's one of the most fun play styles, but you are so removed from a lot of the other stuff. Like, you will get off the seat to go and help with stuff, but for the most part you need to be ready to move that ship and get out of the system. On top of that then, so you have the gunner. The gunner's job is to obviously fire the weapons. There are a few different types of weapons in the game. They come in this like kinetic weapons, energy weapons, or ammo. So ammo is very obvious. They have ammo, they rely on that. Energy weapons rely on a battery, and then kinetic weapons rely on overheating, where they have infinite ammo, but they can overheat very quickly. Not to say other guns can't overheat, it's just that's kind of how they work. And each of the gunners, like the gunners things, are increased range, increased damage, increased accuracy, power up the gun so it does like triple the damage for like 10 seconds or things like that. That's like his main power. Are you more efficient with energy weapons, or are you more efficient with kinetic weapons? That's kind of, as you level up, the gunner becomes very good. Like, the gunner goes from being like okay to very good at the job, especially if you've got, like, in my opinion, either the standard minigun or the standard like cannon. Those guns are what I think are some of the best starting weapons, and you can really do a lot of like protecting of the ship very early on, very easily. Then you come on to the engineer. The engineer his whole job is to fix up the ship, and as you level up, you take less damage from electrical and like other types of damage. You can stand up when the ship warps, because if you don't do that, you will get splattered against the wall. You can charge up batteries in your hand. You basically become very efficient at overpowering things as well, so that they work longer. Engineer the engineer is playing his own game. You as the engineer very rarely see what's going on, because you're in the ship. When you're in a cockpit or when you're in one of the gun seats, you're seeing into space, you're seeing into third person or whatever. There's a lot going on. As the engineer, you are just focused on the alerts popping up. You know, you have to go and charge the thrusters, you have to go and trim the engine, you've got to put out fires, you've got to stop the electrical stuff from breaking. Anything that breaks, you've got to fix. Your whole thing is like constantly running back and forth, fixing things and making sure stuff works. So that's really, really fun. And then last off is the scavenger. And we'll come on to the scavenger later in other methods, but the whole thing of the scavenger is movement options, because the scavenger is the one who can survive the most outside of the ship. They have their special ability is like a lasso that, to start with, will allow you to grab onto things and it will pull you along to places. You get the most oxygen when you leave the ship. When you're using the jetpack, you boost further, you move normally when you're in the jetpack suit. You are basically designed to go out and scavenge, quite literally, and run around very fast and do stuff and be able to survive out in space, because there will be times when the pilot needs to fly away and you're like, oh, well, I better hide here, but you can last a very long time. And scavenger is actually my favourite class, and the reason for that is simply because I love movement option stuff, and none of the other classes can move nearly as fast as the scavenger. Even on the ship, you can still whip yourself around as well, which is really cool. It's a very effective class, though I think people may consider it to be the weakest. So, but we'll come back to him later on. What is cool though is once you've started leveling up, you can kind of mix and match those classes. So, for example, you could be a pilot with potentially some of the engineer's abilities, or maybe you're the gunner with some of the engineers, or the scavenger and engineer's a good mix as well. Once you've maxed out that tree, you get a few more points that you can spend in other classes, and I think it's really useful to look at that and go, okay, what kind of gunner do I want to be? Do I need to be able to charge my own battery if I'm using electronic weapons? That's probably worth doing. Or maybe you want to have a better movement, so you might look at going, oh, well, if I do have to jump off the ship, I want to be able to get around a lot, so I'll take some of the scavenger's abilities. It's a really, really awesome way of doing it, and you can go halfway down the pilot tree and then halfway down something else if you want. You can go proper hybrid. There's a lot of cool abilities. Some abilities in this are definitely more of a popular choice because they just seem better no matter which class you're playing as, which maybe it needs rebalancing a little bit, but for the most part you can have a good mix and match of these classes and have a very good time if you're a very well-rounded player. Though you will never be like amazing at one thing if you do half and half, but you will at least have options, which is good. There is a ton of variety in this game as well, in terms of the ships. So there's only 2 ships currently, which once you've played it enough times, you do kind of get used to them quickly. But those ships have about 7 loadouts each. You have ones that are focused on broadside, ones that are focused on energy, kinetic. One of my favorites is the fact that you can start off a blank ship and it will give you a bunch of crates, which you need crates to be able to like write onto. Guns, gravity scoop, all the things that you might need. and you can load the ship however you want. Now, both ships, one's a lot smaller than the other, but you can have like back guns, side guns, forward guns. You kind of choose how you want to play it. Like, do you want to be flying away so you can shoot backwards? Do you want to be broadsiding and spinning around things? Each thing has its positive and negative. On top of guns, you've got things like the gravity scoop, which allows you to fly alongside items in space, suck them up, saves you going out and getting them. You've got extra power, because the whole game's based around the power management. You've got, what else is there? There's a shield, you can put down different shields, and that helps you survive longer. So there's a whole, like, placement management thing going on as well, which is really, really cool. Usually, when we play, I leave it to the other people to do it, because, like, I'm a bit odd, and I kind of like my setups different to how the rest of my teammates play. But they tend to deal with that. I'm like, yeah, cool, whatever. And there's so you've got the ships, the things you can attach to the ships. You then get relics as you go along, and those relics can have massive buffs or some buffs and debuffs and stuff that can also add to the ship. There's plenty of elements in this game that make this fun, and each run different. And having those variety of guns and switching up where you want stuff. Like if I'm flying, for example, I might be like, well, I want the gravity scoop on the front or the back of the ship. I find that easier to deal with, perhaps, whereas somebody else might want it on the side. So sometimes it's good to let the pilot decide where things go. Sometimes it's good to let the gunners decide where they want to sit and like how you're going to play. So you've got a nice amount of variety and choice there. So that's really good. The missions themselves. There's a fairly decent amount of missions. They usually involve you either going somewhere and blowing something up, fighting off enemy types. You've got one where you have to summon in certain ships and blow them up. You have to fix up a radar station or whatever it is, like a satellite link. You've got ones where you have to go and raid places and go down to outside the ship and go in and find some like documents, essentially. You also have what's the other one? You got bosses. The bosses are kind of interesting. They're very tough. They take a long time. You got the bosses. There's a good variety of missions. Some do overlap, but for the most part, they're actually pretty fun. Some are definitely easier than others as well. Like there's one where you have to go and blow up these crates in space. You just find the item and you fly off. Like it's fairly straightforward. On top of all the mission types, you do have a variety of enemy types as well. So while you're doing the missions and trying to essentially complete your objective, you will come across fighters and bombers and snipers, and that's like the Hollow, which is one type of enemy. Then you've got Remnant, you have to deal with them as well. You've got like mines out in space. Like I said, you've got the bosses. There's a pretty big variety of enemy types, and each one has its own threat. And it can be a pain. You've got summoners, which are really annoying. That if you don't take them out quick enough, they summon in more stuff. And so the game escalates pretty quickly. If you don't understand what each thing does, or you don't learn very quickly, you're going to have a hard time, because some of these enemy types are just a pain and you have to deal with them. I'm almost of the belief that actually having a gun on each side of the ship, front, back, left and right, is probably the best way to go in a lot of ways. Because that means no matter where you are, you can always deal with whatever you're being tackled with. But the enemy types, there is a nice variety there, and some of the bigger ones, they have like weak spots, which is really cool. You've got the Hollow Summoners, which are like ships you can't even fight. They turn up if you take too long on a mission. They're like, get going, basically. They are a nightmare when they turn up, because they're faster than you are. They have crazy, they can blow you up very quickly. One thing that is kind of like nice to have in the gameplay is this game's got a bit of humor. Like, for example, if you warp jump and you're not sat down, and you don't have the right upgrades, you will go flying into a wall and die. So that's never good. You can taunt it. I say taunt. You can acknowledge each other, and they'll say different things. You can do rock paper scissors. You can point at people. Probably the best one is opening the airlock. You can turn the safety off and just shoot out and freeze the ship, which I have done once by pure accident. So that was good. There's humor when you get back to base. There's a lot of visual humor and a lot of like written humor and in the dialogue and stuff like that. So it's quite fun that the game's not. It's got that like, we're on a serious mission, but everything else around it is very silly, which is cool. And one other thing that I really do enjoy about the game is the space movement outside of the ship. It feels really good when you've got the jetpack on and you're flying around and like trying to maneuver and stuff. It feels very floaty. It feels weighty when you land, but it feels very floaty. It just feels good to control you flying around space, flying around like a broken wreckage, or trying to get around. Honestly, very much appreciate how the game implements that part of it, because when you're actually out in space, it's vast. The mission areas are pretty big. It's actually kind of crazy how big some of them are. But I do enjoy the fact that they've not only made the ship feel good to control, and the ship's like the main character of the game, but when you do have to leave it, you feel like, oh, this feels like I'm out in space. And I like the control that you get from that, especially playing the scavenger, where you get extra buffs, essentially, to those things. Now, I actually do like the game. I think the game is very, very good. There are a couple things that I think need a little bit of love and a little bit more improving and things. And this comes to a bigger point that I'll come on to in a minute. But let's just talk about the game with some of these things so far. So the scavenger. I think the scavenger, personally, is my favourite class, like I said earlier. However, the scavenger is by far the weakest of the 4 classes. You probably are better off taking 2 gunners, a pilot and an engineer, or one pilot, 1 gunner, 2 engineers. Because the scavenger's whole thing is that efficiency out in space, collecting stuff, helping out on the ground missions, which you may not do a lot of. And this is why also hybrid into the scavenger is probably better. So you like a gunner into scavenger, engineer into scavenger. What the scavenger needs is either an ability to latch onto the ship with their whip and fly along with it, or magnetic boots to stick to the outside of the ship. I think the scavenger just needs a change where they can be like, yep, the whole thing is maneuverability, getting around, all that sort of stuff. Give them the ability. Now, you could say that the gunner, not the gunner, sorry. You could say that the engineer is the one that should have magnetic boots or whatever. But I think, honestly, the scavenger, a lot of the time, I will go out and fix stuff. When I'm playing a scavenger, because again, I can get around quicker, I can lasso onto the ship and all that sort of stuff. But I think they need something to actually make them worthwhile. I would even increase their movement speed, though you can get upgrades for that. I'd increase their movement speed even more, or just give them buffs to the things they already have, because I just think like it's good. I really enjoy it, but I feel like I'm the person who's adding the least to the team a lot of the time. Because like, don't get me wrong, I like all 4. I like playing the gunner, the pilot, and the engineer. But I hate losing that movement options. I hate the fact that I can't be outside as long, and that just depends on the missions. But I would definitely say the scavenger, I would go back and look at it and add something to it that's a bit more of an incentive for a lot of people to want to play that class. Like there's something maybe just missing that makes it like, oh yeah, this is actually worth having. At the moment, it feels like 50% of the time they're worth having, 50% of the time they're not. So one little criticism I do have is the errors that can occur on a ship. And what I mean by errors is things to fix. A lot of the time, the things to fix are hull breaches, are electrical faults, all that sort of stuff. I sometimes feel like the game needs to do... I know it maybe needs to ramp up the longer you go. But sometimes in the early game, your ship hardly takes any damage or like doesn't do anything. There's not enough major malfunctions. That's probably a better way of describing them, that are happening on the ship. I would definitely love to see more stuff. Even if the percentage of those things goes up with every mission, it'd be really cool to see more of that. Now, I know that each zone that you go to has there's more electrical problems here or this. But it just sometimes feels like, oh, there's not really enough craziness happening. Maybe there's things that we can do to, add more of that, basically. Obviously, more ship variety, always welcome. The only downside to this game now is we've unlocked all the different loadouts for the ships. There's only 2 ships. I think this is a game that, at minimum, needs 4 ships. I think you need to really make those ships feel very distinct from one another, and maybe have pluses and minuses to each one and all that. But it's the one thing that I'm waiting on the most is more ships. It brings me into the biggest thing about this game. Void Crew in its current state is a lot of fun, and I think a lot of people will have a great time with it, playing with their friends and messing around and role-playing piloting the ship and using the ship to get around and do things. I think this game will be better if it gets to like a 3.0 or a 4.0, because everything about this game I like. It's become a game where it's like, I play it once a week, I have my fill of it, I'll come back in a week's time. I have no incentive, even with the unlocks that I don't have, there's not much of an incentive. I look at a game like this in the same way I look at a game like Deep Rock Galactic. I jumped into Deep Rock Galactic at a certain point where there was a ton of content, and I feel like I really want Void Crew to get to that point where there is more mission variety, more ships, more ship loadouts, a ton of more unlockable stuff. Just things to keep the player interested, because the cool gameplay is very fun, but I think there needs to be more malfunctions on the ship. I think the scav needs some love. just more mission variety, just things added in, because right now I've played enough of this game to go, right, I've kind of had my fill of it. Yeah, there's still stuff for me to unlock, but like I don't really feel the need to play it. Like if other people want to play it, it's good, because we'll have some runs now that will go on for like 2 hours, and you know, and it does start to get a bit repetitive, and I think that's kind of my only issue, is that if you're going to do a run that's going to be that long, I want it to be, you want it to be nail biting, or you want to be able to have like more modifiers, more options basically for your runs. And right now that's kind of where I'm at with it, where I'm like, this is a fun game and you will have a fun time with it if you like your Leifo company, if you like other games that are focused on co-op, that there's a lot of games like that now. You'll have a blast with this, but the fun can only go so long. Now I don't know how big the team is. I know it's a small indie game and it's only just come out in 1.0. But I truly think if this game gets a couple more major patches and we get a lot more stuff with it and a lot more things to do, this is going to have some serious legs. And I think a lot of people, streamers, people playing with their friends, are going to have an absolute blast with it. Like, I want to see malfunctions with the airlocks where, like, maybe the safeties do come off and the doors get stuck open. You have to go and fix them. Like, things like that. Things that can lead to more hilarity. You know, maybe the ship gets stuck turning left only or something. You have to, like, fix up the pilot's, like, ship. There's a ton of things that I think they could do that would make this a lot of fun. Give me that sliding scale. Like, oh, we want to play it on a bit of an easier one, but we want things to come in gradually. Or maybe we're like, no, we want to go hard in, make it all come at once, make it a difficult run. I just think it's a game that is going to have, if it gets the support and it has long legs, this game is going to be so much better over time. It's already good. It's good right now. I wouldn't say this game is great. I wouldn't say it's amazing. I would say it's a solid, good game, and you will have fun with it. And the length of how long you play that will depend on the individual. Right now, I think I'm still having fun with it when we do play it, but I want more from this game. I want to see a new ship added in. I want to see more mission variety, and I'm a patient dude. Like, oh wait, I'll give, you know, these devs. We've just had Christmas. You know, I hope that these devs have. Hopefully the game's done well, but hopefully they want to continue to add more stuff to this to make this a bigger project. They might not, right? But ultimately, that's how I feel about it. I really like Void Crew. It's definitely a game I'm going to be playing throughout 2025. I hope to come back to it when they add in new content. But I think if you're thinking about looking for a game to play that's a bit of fun, a bit of co-op experience, and you want to have a laugh with your friends, this is, if you like other games in this genre, I think you're very much going to like Void Crew. So there you go. There's my thoughts on it. Hopefully that's helpful to you guys. That's going to do it for me today then. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. If you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, then hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description as always. And until next video, I will see you then.